Welcome. Today we're going to focus on responding to a text, namely A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Let's look first at the prompt. It says, write 1 to 2 paragraphs about the text using the prompt below. Choose one of the big 7 concepts and explain how it is featured in this text. You should also include a message that the author is getting across and the use of a stylistic technique and its effect on the reader. Now, that seems like a lot, but I'm going to break it down for you and show you how to do each one of those things. Now, the big 7 the big 7 concepts are listed below, and they include culture, identity, perspective, representation, creativity, communication, and transformation. And you can talk about any one of those 7 as long as you can find a good example of it in the text. Here's what else you'll need to include. You want to make sure that you have stated the title, the author, the text type, and the publication date. That's your basic information about the text. You want to include the author's message as well as your excerpt from the text, one of those big 7 concepts, and then a stylistic technique and its effect on the reader. Here's the excerpt that I selected. It's a speech from Scrooge's nephew, and it's a little bit on the long side, so I'm going to cut a little bit out of that when I put it into my own writing. And let's look now at what that will look like as I'm putting all of this together. So I've color-coded some of my response. I don't want you to do that in your own writing. I do that so that things are a little bit more clear for you. And here's how I start off. Though you might first think of receiving presents when you're thinking about Christmas, Charles Dickens made giving to others a centerpiece of his novella, A Christmas Carol, published in 1843. That's highlighted in yellow because that includes my author, Charles Dickens, my text type, novella, my title, A Christmas Carol, and the publication date, 1843. His story features a miser named Ebenezer Scrooge who despises charity and cares only about money. In stave 1, Scrooge's nephew wishes him a Merry Christmas, to which Scrooge responds, "Bah, humbug." Scrooge disdains the holiday and sees no purpose in it. He calls it a time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer. His nephew disagrees and explains his views. Now you're going to notice that this is a block indent quote. That's because it's more than 4 lines long. You'll need to do the same thing if your excerpt is longer than 4 lines. I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come round, as a good time. A kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good. And I say, God bless it. After my excerpt, I'm going to move into my commentary. I've highlighted the parts in green that are part of what's required. This is an excellent example of perspective. The author is using dialogue to let the characters share their polar opposite views on the holiday of Christmas. It gives the reader something to consider. Hearing Scrooge's criticism of Christmas, they might wonder if the holiday really does any good for anyone. While Scrooge's language is colorful and entertaining, especially when he uses violent imagery like this, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding, and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should. Though that violent imagery is amusing to people, his nephew's speech is more enlightened and might inspire the reader to be more generous. He describes his belief that being generous has done me good and will do me good. This gives the reader a noble example to emulate. So let me break down what I highlighted in green here. Perspective is one of the big 7 concepts. Dialogue and imagery are both techniques that the author uses. And then when I explain the effect on the reader, I use different phrases like it gives the reader something to consider, and they might wonder, or might inspire the reader, or this gives the reader. Those are all examples of ways that you can introduce an effect on the reader. So let's recap real quickly. At the beginning of your response, you're going to want the basics about your text, your title, author, text type, publication date. You'll want an excerpt that you're focused on analyzing. And then you'll want to follow up with commentary that features one of the big seven concepts, stylistic techniques, and their effect on the reader. Remember, good writing comes from good thinking, and your thoughts are excellent. So get to it, scholars.